So we can see these different mental models and the different assumptions that um, pioneers and more inherited servants of the church would use. So that distinct kind of mindset can be described as the difference between causal logic and effectual logic. And many of us in the church world, we're trained for the classic causation model. And what that means in business world is, so you target a customer, there's market definition, segmentation, targeting, position to reach that customer. You can think of the way pastors do that as like, we're trying to get people in our pews. So we have a vision statement and so many goals to get to such and such a time. We'll have this number and da da da. We use that causal logic approach. Effectual reasoning, which is what expert entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs use, is there's multiple possibilities. We're just going to add some stuff. We're going to try some strategic partners. We're going to build some things. The customer or the person we're trying to reach will kind of emerge as we experiment and work with the effects. So in causal logic, we're thinking, of causation, like we're going to do this and it's going to cause that. In effectual reasoning, we're starting with the effects of something and we're building our way into something new, which is how you kind of find new products, new ways of doing things. People realize something they needed that had never been thought of before, kind of thing, innovation. So a simpler way to think of that is if in a managerial type causal reasoning way, we have these different means, multiple means to get to this given goal. We've already described what that goal is going to be. We got our vision statement. There it is. Here's the means. By such and such time, we're going to do these things. Entrepreneurs and pioneers start with means. So do I have a person of peace? Do I have a community? Do I have some resources here? Can I do this? Do I have a space to do it in? And we just throw that together and multiple possible kind of ends emerge out of that. This can go many different directions and we just kind of follow the way that it goes. Now, I want to say that we need both of those types of thinking in the church. So please don't hear me dismissing one. And I think it's really important when we look at Jesus' teaching in Matthew 9, I think the impulse of pioneers is to go, let's go with the new shiny thing. Let's just abandon what is. I hope that you've heard throughout the Fresh Expressions movement and pioneer ministry, that's not the posture of this, right? Jesus teaches about the wineskins, the new wine and the old wineskin, and nobody puts new wine in an old skin, because in the process of fermentation and expansion and swelling and then hardening, the skin becomes rigid and firm. And so if you pour new wine into that, as the wine goes through the process of fermentation and expansion, it would literally burst the skin, right? So Jesus is saying, I got this new wine I want to pour into you. But if I poured it into you in the rigidity of your thinking, it would kind of burst you, right? But notice Matthew's version of it, at least, what it says. You put new wine into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved. New wine and new wineskins, old wine and old wineskins, both are preserved. And what we're saying here is you need causal logic and effectual logic. You need pioneer ministry and inherited traditional forms of church. The gospel, the person of Jesus, whatever you define that as, it doesn't change. The content doesn't change. The delivery of those things, the wineskin, is always changing. The wineskin of the Church of Jesus Christ has been changing for 2,000 years, and adapting and emerging and innovating. So I hope you've seen that in the kind of the whole history of the different models of mission that we looked at. But we need a church that has new wineskins and old wineskins together, that good vintage stuff and that fresh emergent kind of stuff as well. Our bishop here in Florida says this, and I love it: the time of the professional minister is over. The time of the missionary pastor has come. And thinking about that old wine, new wineskin thing in a post-Christendom scenario, every single clergy person, every single Christian really, is going to be just as much missionary as pastor. So the time of I'll just be a professional minister and people will crowd into my church because we're in a Christian setting is over. We all have to be missionary pastors in this time. And I think a helpful way to think about that is, what if those of us who have more pioneer instincts and tendencies, what if we thought about giving 50% of our time to our congregation, growing the center, caring for the congregation, and about 55% of our time, 50% of our time as a missionary in the community? And we really have to do both and. We have to do both and. And instead of thinking about how do we get people to come to church, the central thing that pioneers are thinking about is, what about all the people who are never going to come? And now that we understand a little bit about the pioneer mindset and the theology behind that, we could see why that would be the question. So the Breaking New Ground report, some of you mentioned this in your writings, that the Mission Shaped Church report was drawing from. We saw this need for new entrepreneurial type ministers, that we need pioneer type ministers. And in the preface to Christianity Rediscovered, which I mentioned earlier, Vincent Donovan, there's this wonderful line in the beginning where it says, do not try to call them back to where they were, and do not try to call them to the place where you are, beautiful as that place may seem to be. You must have the courage to go with them to a place where neither you nor they have been before. And that's really what we're talking about, pioneer ministry. We're joining the work of the Spirit. We're going into a new place with new people and new places and new ways. We're seeing what God can do with that. But we're not abandoning the inherited church as we know it. And we're not dismissing that, and that's not needed anymore. It really is this both and way of being church. And we're going to need both of those. So that concludes the lecture on pioneer ministry. And thank you all for joining into this, and looking forward to the conversations this week.